And that
Yeah.
bam. All right, we're in the game, coach. Here we go.
Recording.
It says we're recording. I'm kind of a rookie at this whole interview thing. I know there's supposed to be like a build up to the thing before we start talking, but I just kind of hit go and talk. I hope that works for you.
It's fine with me.
All right, good deal. I did want to take a few minutes before we get started, and I know I've told you this, I've made posts about it, but I want to acknowledge the influence that you've had in my career. I don't even remember the year that I came up to visit your facility, but I remember Ben Bruno was still there and Anna Taco was there. I cannot remember if Brendan or any of those guys were there. I suspect they were. But I remember specifically meeting Anna and Ben. And that trip up there, and those 4 days or 3 days, however many days it was a long time ago, I got to see my dream in action. I got to see what I was envisioning and daydreaming about, and I got to see it happen. And it was so efficient. Everything made sense. There was a rhyme and a reason to why you guys do everything that you do. And I got to be honest with you, I hadn't been exposed to anything like that at that point. To me, I was seeing a lot of like powerful coaches that were good at what they did, but they kind of had this like I'm winging it feeling, outside of their programming. But everything made sense at your facility. And the one thing specifically that really stuck out, and you've even written a book on this now that I think about it, is how to set your gym up for optimal traffic flow. And the way that you guys had things set up has allowed us to develop a schedule to make more money, quite frankly. And that's been a big deal. I also want to highlight for people watching that if you are in a position of authority, little things can have a huge impact on people who are on their own path. And I've said this before publicly. I'm sure I've said it to you privately, but your acknowledgement and the fact you remember that I have a daughter has always meant a lot to me. There are a lot of guys that I've met in this industry, and they never mention that. They never, and if you get to know me, you'll find out that my children are a gigantic part of my life. So, just your acknowledgement there has always been big. And I think there's some lessons that people can pull from that before we even get started. And I get to kind of, pick your brain a little bit, so to speak.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the things I remember about you. That's what sticks out in my mind, was your story. That's why it was funny when, listening to your podcast, which is what caused me to, to contact you about this. But, it's, I think, and you've probably seen, I repost Alistair McCaw's Big Four a couple times a year from his book. I think Be Champion Mind. I forget which book it was, but he talks about 20 minutes of reading, 20 minutes of writing, 20-minute nap, or 20-minute workout, 20 minutes of thoughtfulness. And the piece we're always missing, I think, is the thoughtfulness piece and trying to remember things that are going to be important to the other person. It's basic Dale Carnegie stuff, but it's really, I think, carried me and now carries us, with like Kevin and Brendan and guys like that. Like we've tried to hire people that have that sort of ethos. And then we've tried to really reinforce that in them that, hey, this stuff is important. Remembering, I tell people like my biggest success with the Red Sox, our 2 years, we went from the worst team to winning the championship. And if someone said, why were you successful, at least me in strength and conditioning, I said, because I spent a lot of time reading the media guide and learning about the guys so I could have conversations. The same way I did with you about like, is your wife down here? What about the kids? What are they doing? Are they in school? Are they out of school? Like that ability to create a conversation with someone that makes them feel that you give a shit is massive. And I don't care what business it is. Like you could you could have a dry cleaner where you are, right? You could have a car wash, whatever. But if people pulled in and you were like, hey, how's your wife doing? How's your daughter? Whatever it was. I mean, people come back for that. We talked about that today, in terms of in our staff meeting, we talked a little bit about, I always bring up CrossFit and the community building aspect of CrossFit. I said, as much as I'm not a CrossFit fan, I am a huge fan of their ability to create community. You'll have someone being like, yeah, I threw up today and everybody clapped for me. When I was over the barrel, it was so great. I was like getting cheered on. And, that's the reality of the situation. And you need to understand, I think it was, because and I'm going to jump ahead of you, like your first question, about things that people don't get. I think this is the big part that people don't get.
I agree.
Business, they know their numbers. They know how much something costs. They know how much money they're supposed to make, but they don't understand that we're in a customer service world, and customer service really matters.
Absolutely.
And when you remember things about people, that has a really significant lasting impression on them. And I've seen it. I mean, this is like, for me, this is year 41
Yeah.
of, like being on the ground coaching. And that's the part that I've come to realize is that the relationship part is always going to carry.
It does. And I've taken that to heart over the years. And like, if there's somebody in the industry that I know and I have conversations with and I find out it's their birthday, I reach out. I often just text them. I try not to just, jump in the news feed. We had some people come visit us yesterday, a walk-in, considering moving here from Colorado Springs. They didn't have a baseball coach. I met both their kids. I text messaged him later on in the evening after I made a connection for him with a baseball training center. And I made a point to mention both of his kids' names and personalize the message. Here at BCI, if an athlete does something good, we put it on our social media and we highlight it, not just athlete of the month. If they have a good game and we find out, we try to highlight them. And that stuff matters. Like, everybody wants to belong and everybody wants to feel significant. And when people of authority really care that much, and I say care that much, it almost sounds simple, like care so much to remember your name, right? But I mean, that stuff, it really, really matters, and it impacts people. And I know you mentioned Carnegie, and I'm sure How to Win Friends and Influence People is on your list of books everybody should read. And we've got an intern in here now, and he was sitting over there debriefing with one of my coaches on his intern module this week. And part of it was reading a couple chapters in How to Win Friends and Influence People. And we just talked about that simple thing, like remembering people's names and remembering details about them and finding opportunity to reflect that back to them. And that's a great hack or segue into that first question. Everybody knows they should do this, but they don't really do it. Why do you think that is?
Well, part of the problem in our particular profession, and probably in a lot of professions, is ego. I think some people think it makes them look soft. I always say, we're such a hardo field to begin with, that the idea that you're going to be kind and be thoughtful is almost, I guess, antithetical to some people. Like, you can't be, I got to be a tough guy. I got to be snarling at people and, getting after it, all the bullshit, that we listen to, with all the juice guys, I got to bring the juice. There are all these things I got to do. And I'm like, actually, no, like, especially like I always tell people with pro athletes, like, they look at you, if you're a juice guy, they laugh at you.
I agree.
You get away with that shit in college just because, the head coach is backing that guy and he can jump around and headbutt you and, run into you and do all this shit. You get the pros and guys are like, fuck it. Can't that. Like, I got plenty of that. I don't need you to jack me up and juice me up and do all this stuff. But I do need somebody that gives a shit.
Yes.
And someone who understands, because even like I said with pros, as much as you can look at them and think, whatever, a bunch of spoiled babies, rich guys, they're actually guys who have a lot of problems dealing with, I have this conversation with my guys all the time. They have a reversed income curve. They're getting the majority of their money much too soon and then trying to figure out how do you make it last. Whereas the rest of us did it back, did it the right way, in terms of, we didn't make a lot in the beginning, and then towards the end we're making a lot, and it works out a lot better. There's just a lot of things in these guys' lives that are complicated.
Yes.
And just somebody that actually cares, like, makes a really big difference.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but the pros that I train, I've developed such a deep relationship with them. When they call me, 90% of the time, it has nothing to do with training. They're wanting some type of advice or input from me, because through the training process, we've developed this bonding capital. We've had a lot of conversations about life as a whole, and they know I've invested in them and I care about them. And I believe they care about me, especially some of these guys that, I've known them since they were 12 years old and now they're in the NFL. And it's just a really unique thing. And that, I tell people all the time that my experiences training pro athletes made me a whole lot better with high school and college athletes, because I used to think I had to be the hard ass. I used to think I was never like real juicy. I wasn't much for the show, but I would rip you the way I was coached, and I was hard. And I had a kid named Jordan Matheson, Jersey right there. He played, 8 years in the NFL, and he impacted me tremendously one day just by telling me that he loved me. And I was like, what? Like, he was like, man, I love you, man. I was like, whoa. Like, I hadn't heard that. And it shocked me. And now, I mean, I was in his wedding. He's one of my closest friends in the world now. And he really impacted me, man. And I've carried that into high school athletes and mentoring coaches, leading with my heart instead of like this tough guy persona that so many people in our industry think they've got to like try on and wear. And it's like, if you aren't bald, buff, and doing this, it's like almost you're not allowed to be a strength coach. And I do see some of that changing in our world, which I'm happy about. But I do think that we've stayed in that mold for a very long time, and we still got a ways to go before we break out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to feel like guys like me help to change it, because I always look at people and say, I mean, I jokingly say in lectures all the time, and you've probably heard me say it, if we were in a gym together, you would never ask me for advice. Like, you wouldn't look at me and be like, oh, that guy, like he knows what he's talking about in terms of strength and conditioning or fitness or whatever it is. You'd be like, I always say, average looking, bald, skinny, fat guy with glasses, you know what I mean? Like nothing. I mean, I am absolutely positively nothing special to look at, yet I've been able to succeed in a field where, I mean, I remember, and because I mean, I'm old. I remember being at the old NSCA shows. Guys like me, there weren't many guys. Everybody was Jack, and probably I would, I hate to say it, I would say, there was a large percentage of those guys who probably had used performance-enhancing drugs themselves at one time, if they weren't actually using them right at that time while they were coaching. And I mean, it was a very, I think it was a real false culture in a lot of ways. And I think it took, as you said, it took a long time for us to even start to turn. And in sports like football, we haven't turned the culture probably.
No.
But in a lot of the other professional sports, I think we have. I think there's a lot more, what I would say normal, average-looking people doing the job, in hockey or in baseball or in basketball. But football still kind of clings to this, like the image, like you said, bald goatee, jacked kind of looking guy. That's got to be what the strength coach looks like. I used to always laugh. One of my closest friends and one of my first assistants, a guy named Jeff Oliver, who's at College of Holy Cross right now in Worcester. And he's a former NFL offensive lineman, used to train with me. But when he was my assistant, people would routinely walk in and walk right up to him and be like, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" And he'd always be like, "Over there." People would almost look like, like double take, like, "You mean over there? There was just that, like the bald guys over there." But I don't see, what I, expect Mike Boyle. People, I can't tell you the number of times people have met me and said, "I really thought you'd be bigger." Yeah. I've heard that hundreds of times. "I thought you'd be bigger."
I suspect you've overcome those biases that people have because of some of the things we talked about, emotional intelligence, the ability to connect with people, and also your knowledge base. Like if somebody talks to you, they obviously know, what you're doing. Have you ever felt at any point in time that you needed to conform, that you needed to like, man, I don't know if I look the part? Or did you kind of always intuitively know, like, man, I am who I am and this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, it's really weird because I never did. I think there was a time, because the weird part is I was a powerlifter. I was really strong in my early 20s. And I think that did help me initially in my career gain some credibility with football, because I was 180 and I could outlift the vast majority of the guys that were in the room.
Yeah.
But I still never looked at, like, I've never really looked the part. And, even at that time, I didn't really look the part. I kind of looked the part of a reasonably in shape 20-something-year-old guy, but not a guy, with a, close to 500 squat and close to 500 deadlift. That wasn't what people expected. So people always, was kind of be like, whoa, like, you put 4 or 5 in the bar and you do 5 squats, and guys would be like, "Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll listen to you." But that was very short-lived in terms of, after a while, one, my body just kind of broke down. And then 2, I never felt the need to be like, to make that kind of impression on people. I think I wanted to make an impression on people of, I know what I'm talking about. And that was something that I really prided myself on, was that if I felt like if you talked to me about whatever, your problem, your injury, your training, you would probably want to train with me.
Yeah.
Because it would all make sense. And that, I think I've probably made a career off of just being able to simplify things and make things make sense and be able to explain them to people in ways that they understood.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, sometimes the average professional athlete probably isn't, they're probably average intelligence, maybe below average intelligence in some cases, but it's not, you don't get, they probably, I guess, really, if I'm being straightforward, they probably have the same curve as general population, So,
Hey, Kagan, come here real quick. I'm sorry, Coach. Just because she's here, I want to introduce you.
oh
This is
yeah, please. How are you? I look at your pictures all the time. So I just saw you today. Was today at the end of school? Is that what that one on Instagram was? So is school done for the summer? Yeah. So you're on summer vacation right now.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's go time. All right. All right, kiddo. Let me get back to my interview. Do your thing.
All right. Nice to meet you officially.
She's silly mode. There we go.
Cool.
I apologize for cutting.
No, never apologize for that.
It's a good opportunity, as a whole. And well, I guess it gives me a good because I could listen to you talk all day. It gives me a good opportunity to segue into another question that I selfishly want to understand, because I think a lot of people in our industry, when you first start coaching people, like you're so hyped, you don't even consider that it might be really hard to keep up training people from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the rest of your life. You also don't really consider that, like, at some point in time, I might not even want to train people. I might have to take on another role. So I was wondering, like, what does your role look like right now at your facility? What is your day-to-day role? And were there any life events or things that forced you to kind of take this path? Or did you kind of always know from the beginning you were going to build this thing that MBSC has become?
I will say I had no idea that I was going to build the thing that MBSC had become. I don't think I had the capacity of dreaming that big at that time. My father was a high school principal, had been a high school teacher, had been a high school coach. I don't think I ever dreamed that I would own a business. I don't think any of those things. It's been a very kind of slow, organic process. But I think the one thing that's been good for me is I've always been kind of innately curious, and I've liked being good at whatever it was I was trying to do. So I learned a lot as, in the process of trying to get into business, but I never thought it would end up like this. But that's like segues, I look at like what's my role. I always jokingly, I say my role is I'm everybody's assistant, because one of the things I think to be a successful business person is it can't be the Mike Boyle show. If it's the Mike Boyle show, then Mike Boyle is the limiting factor in the growth and development of the business. But if you go in there and you meet whatever, I've got an amazing staff, Kevin Carr or Steve Bigelow or Vinny Saluto or Pat Stefanski or whoever it is that you meet, I might be helping any of them at any point in time with their group. Like Vinny does our pro hockey group, Pat does our like elite level female group. I help out with both of those groups, but I'm not in charge. They're in charge. I'm there to advise. I'm there to if there's a question that maybe is going to be more difficult to answer, I'm there to help with that answer. But in general, what I've tried to do, at least in my business, is really create some autonomy in the people that I work with. And even like, the terminology, I try to never use the word work for. Like I never say, hey, Andy works for me. Like when I introduce people, I say, hey, yesterday, Joe, one of the coaches who helped me with my son and his friends, came to the lacrosse game. And I introduced everybody, this is Joe that works with me. I never, because everybody knows I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And if I say, oh, this is Joe, he works for me, then it's like, Mike's such an asshole. Like, yeah, I know that he works for him. Why did he have to use those words, except for him to try to show his superiority over this person, obviously like is his underling, I pay your salary kind of thing. Yeah. And so, that's all part of developing your team. It's like being a really good head coach. You see sometimes really good head coaches. And I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and they were talking about, really good head coach. He just kind of walks around the field and watches he watches his assistant. He's got a defensive coordinator. He's got an offensive coordinator. He's got position coaches, and he may jump in here and there to interject some things. But in general, he's the supervisor. And that's the role that I want to have because, and we go back, I've done a couple of business talks, and, one of the things, and I remember Alan Cosgrove said this years ago, he said, if you have a business that depends on you being there every hour of the day, you don't have a business, you have a shitty job.
Yes.
And and I remember thinking that because that for a while that was it. Like I was, I was trying to be all things to all people, and I realized that that's it's a short-term strategy. It's something that might get you to a certain point, but it won't get you over the hump. And so now I'm the assistant. You know, I always said sometimes people would look at me and say, and this has actually happened. I had a girl one day. I went over and corrected her on something, and she went to Steve, who was coaching, and she said, "Steve, some like rando old guy in a ratty sweatshirt just told me to do X."
That's good.
And Steve was like, "Rando old guy, red sweatshirt?"
Yeah.
He was like, "Yeah, red hoodie." And she was like, "Oh, that's Mike." And she was like, "That's Mike Boyle." You know, so the kids, like a lot of kids don't even know him. I had one kid, I had to show my ID. I literally had to go get my license out of the office and bring it out. Because he was like, Mike Boyle isn't even a guy. Like Mike Boyle's a place. Like, he's not a person.
That's great.
And I'm like, no, like I'm a real live person. I'm Mike Boyle. You know,
Yeah.
It's like trying to convince somebody that you're Santa Claus, you know, and it was like, but that's, I think, when you know you've done the job well, because we always say, you know, we want people to think like MBSC is a brand. When you think about MBSC, you think about good training, you think about good education. You don't think, hey, I wonder if Mike Boyle's going to be there when I show up. Or at least that's not what I want people to think. I want people to think, you know, no matter when I go, no matter who I meet, it's going to be a really, really good experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just kind of described like everybody's assistant. That describes what I've said. Like, I want to become operationally irrelevant, but I want to be able to help with everything around here that my expertise can lend itself to. And that's a really challenging thing. And I think the hardest part about it for a lot of people is building a team, getting a team that they can trust, putting them in the right seat, and then building everything around them. And what has happened to a lot of people that I know, or things that I've watched from afar, is they'll find that team for a while, and then there's kind of a cap on their ability to grow inside that company. There's only so much money you can pay somebody to be a trainer. There's margins that have to be met. There's only so many people that can ascend into management positions, so you've got limited opportunity there. So I remember you talking about, and I don't remember when, but I know I pulled this from you, about encouraging entrepreneurship with the trainers inside your building. And now I know you've partnered with some of them on different ventures, like Certified Functional Strength Coach, which our team is certified for, and we're a big believer in. But I wanted to talk to you about that. How did that thought process evolve? And is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's kind of at that point where their trainers are making good money, but to get to the next level, they need to find some niche or expertise that they can take more ownership over and partner with somebody on?
Yeah, I think, you know, what I found was exactly what you're talking about. I needed, you know, we were doing a great job developing staff for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people would be there for 5 years and then they'd leave. And I'd help them leave. I'd help them to try to get a better job, help them try to figure out where it was they really wanted to be. But I started to look at, I had some guys, particularly Kevin Carr and Brendan Rearick, I thought these guys are really good and they don't want pro sports. They don't want college sports. How do I keep these guys around? And one of the ways I started to realize was that, as you said, some joint venture ideas. Initially, Kevin and Brendan wanted to start their own massage therapy business called Movement is Medicine.
I remember that.
And, you know, I could have been like offended. Hey, you're leaving me. You know, yeah, guys, get out of here. Go find your own space. And instead we had space and they were like, you know, we want to rent that space. I'm like, great. And we kind of defined, okay, here's the parameters. Here's how we set it up so that, you know, you're not cannibalizing our business. You're enhancing our business and we can hopefully enhance your business. So that was the first of these ventures. And then when the certified functional strength coach idea came up, you know, that had come up a bunch of times with guys, you know, we should be doing this. We should be doing this. And finally, I kind of gave them the parameters and I said, okay, here's how I think it would be if we did it. And then it was Kevin Larrabee and Brendan and Kevin Carr. And I basically said to my business partner, Bob, I said, okay, let's give them some equity in this thing, because ultimately, if it's going to go, it's going to be because they make it go and because they've got some incentive to make it go. Because in any business situation, you realize there's always the resentment of I do all the work and Mike makes all the money, right? And I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to eliminate that resentment. I didn't want people to feel like I'm doing all this work, Mike's making all the money. I wanted to be like, no, you know, I told them, you're going to do all the work. I'm going to pay you really well for that work. And then you're going to get a percentage of the profit. Now that's a win-win-win situation because they're getting paid. You know, like Kevin and those guys, when they started out, they were getting $500 on the weekend to go teach it, sir. So they were making pretty good money, and they're getting to go out. They're the show. They're going to go down to BCI with you, and they're going to spend the weekend, and they're going to meet. They meet the who's who of strength and conditioning. They hang out. They have a couple of beers. They teach the course. They make some money. It's all great, but I'm making money, right? I haven't done anything. I'm making money. But then at the end, the company gets profitable. And now at the end, they've made money. I'm not taking the salary. All I'm taking is my percentage of the profit. But then they get a percentage of the profits. So they get paid for the work that they do. They get a lot of satisfaction out of the work that they do. And they get a percentage of the profit. Some people would look at that and think that's a dumb plan. Like you don't make as much money. And I'm always, I used to always love the idea when someone said, do you want a slice of pizza? Do you want your whole pizza? Or do you want a slice of 100 pizzas? You know what I mean? I'm like, I want a slice of 100 pizzas, actually. And I'll let people can have the other 7 slices. Just keep giving me a slice of, give me 100 of them and give me 1 slice out of each one. I will be very content. That strategy has really worked for us. We're doing it with our online stuff. We're doing it with our certification stuff. Everything now is a partnership with kind of a key employee where this is like, hey, Andy, this is your thing. You run with it. We make money. You're going to make money. And you're going to get paid for all your hours. So there's no, you never feel, because I've just gone through that situation where you see people who feel taken advantage of in some kind of business venture. Like, I did all the work and I got nothing when it was all, when everything was said and done. I want my guys to think I did all the work and now I'm benefiting directly from that work. And they look at it and they always, so is Mike.
Yeah.
Because I am.
Absolutely.
But I'm not doing it in a way that they would then perceive as unfair. Even with bonuses, like I said, Bob, we got a really good year. Give them a bigger bonus. Take another whatever. Take 10 grand out of the money and split it up amongst those guys, so that they get a larger than normal bonus at the end of the year, and then they're still getting their percentage of the profit. So that was always my thought process. And in all honesty, man, it is going to make for a great retirement for me, to be perfectly truthful, because I can sell the gym and still be partners in, 3 of these ventures with these guys, and be able to walk away and have a nice steady income, a nice residual income for things that I'm no longer really involved in.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think your example there is going to be really important for the industry as a whole, because that slice of however many pies, I think, is the move for a sport performance business owner that really wants to build wealth. We're in a position now where I've got 2 guys that I really value. They're almost maxed out hour-wise, and it just makes sense to start creating some of these opportunities. I'm not so sure what we're going to do yet, but it's there. We are actually starting with remote. There are some remote opportunities for them. We've done really well there. But that's a really empowering thing to me. Like if I was a strength coach and I wanted to find somewhere to work, I would want to work at a place like that. I would want to work where I know somebody was willing, if I was worth it, that they would partner with me. And I don't think a lot of people think this way. I think a lot of gym owners are trying to hold everything to themselves. And I think that limits the quality of employee they get. I think they've got a lot more turnover because of it. I think if more people could open their mind up to this, it makes a lot of sense. Like I talked to my 2 guys yesterday about some things I want them to prepare for. I'm looking into some real estate investments, and I'm going to make a play over the next couple of years, maybe this year. And there's an opportunity for them to get involved in some of those things. And I strongly believe if you want to build a business that lasts, you've got to create these opportunities for people. Now here, I'm 20 years in business. I got a lot, longer to go, but I feel confident that if I can continue to find these type of opportunities for people, that I'll be able to have a strong team and continue to make an impact in this community, which is our focus. We want to leave a lasting legacy and impact in this community. So that's just another example that I think you've set that is really important.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really important, but I also think it's really smart.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I mean, I look at it. I used to, I worked for a guy named Jack Parker for almost 30 years at VU, who was our hockey coach. And Coach Parker, if you're a hockey fan, everybody knows who he is. But, he's the winningest coach in the NCAA in one sport at one school. He won almost 1,000 games at Boston University without ever leaving, without ever taking another job. But he would say that to me a lot of times. He'd be like, Mike, I'm good to you because it's good for me. and I remember I always appreciated that about him because there was no phony bullshit about it. He was like, yeah, I'm paying you more money. I'm letting you, whatever I'm doing for you, I'm doing it because I want you to stay, because that ultimately is good for me. And I think that's what people, again, I just don't think that most people are very good business people, because I feel like they miss so much of the basic fundamental stuff. I did a business talk for Pat Beath, and I said, basically, if you have a good product, you have a good price, you treat your employees well, you treat your clients well. I'm like, thank you for coming to my TED talk on business. You know what I mean? Like, it's one slide. Because if you do that, like if your product is good, and that's like you said, you came to our place and you were like, hey, the product is really good. It's well organized, it's well thought out, it's well planned. And, you met, like, you remembered people, you remembered, Anna, and you remember people that were there that day. Right. And then you think, now all I got to do is treat my clients well. Yeah. And I got a really good business, because now my clients want to stay, my employees want to stay, everybody's happy. And I always talk about, have you read First Break All the Rules?
I have not.
All right, so put that on your list. First Break All the Rules is Marcus Buckingham, but it's basically, they did a survey. I forget the name of the company, but it was like, one of those big consulting companies like McKinsey or somebody like that. And they studied 25,000 people, and they asked them, like, what was important at their job, why they stayed at their job. And money never made the top 10.
Right.
There were all these other things, do I have a best friend at work? Does someone, is there a management person who cares about me? Do I have an opportunity to do great work? Like, there are all these other things that all came in ahead of money. Mm-hmm. And every business talk I've ever done, I put that up on the screen. I say to people, these are 10 things that cost nothing. Yep. That retain employees, and then good employees retain good clients. And that builds, people look at us, they're almost like, I don't know how you did it. And I look at them and think, I don't know how everyone can't do it. Because we've been telling everybody all along, like, you came, like you said, I don't know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, who knows when it was. Like, you actually came to Winchester, right? Do you remember? Was it more of like a boxy warehouse kind of place that was sort of cut up into different rooms? Do you remember? Yeah. That's, so I think, so we've been in our new location for 13 years. So it was more than 13 years ago that you came. Yeah. But there's things that you remember that are fundamental to why we're still in business, why, our competitors have come and gone, why people are, out of the industry. And it's, to me, those things are not the least bit complicated. As you said, I remember that Andy's got a daughter, and that's really important to him. And I still remember that. That was 13 years ago. Every time I see you, first thing I ask you is, how's your daughter doing? Yep. You know what I mean? It's like, because I remember, that I just remember thinking, wow. And I remember being impressed, because you were a young guy then. Yep. And you had just kind of figuring it out. But one of the things that you had figured out was that you wanted to be a better family man. That was one of the things that was really important to you. And I was like, okay, I remember this, and if you need to find what's memorable about that person and what's going to create some, some lasting value in that relationship. And in some ways people say that's so contrived. And I'm like, absolutely. It's super contrived. Yeah. I'm trying, I want to create a relationship with this person. So I'm going to remember things that are important to them, and I'm going to ask them about that. That's contrived as all hell. Yeah. Right. But it's also really good human dynamics. And I think sometimes really good human dynamics is really contrived.
Yes.
Like you said, the birthday thing, right? I mean, that's contrived. You put effort. You say, I'm going to send this person a text on their birthday. I do it. I'm a big Facebook birthday guy. I try to look every day. I don't always do it, but I try to look every day. I'll have people Facebook, like sometimes, Facebook saves you. And I'll look on Facebook and I'll just, happy birthday. And some people are like, I can't believe you remember every year. And I'm like, just because if it wasn't for Facebook, I wouldn't remember every year. But I'm looking, and I might send out happy birthdays to 10 people on any given day of the 5,000 Facebook friends I have. Mm-hmm. But every one of those 10 people feels significant and knows nothing of the other 9. They only know that I remembered their birthday. That's right. And even people like, people are talking about like handwritten notes, wearing a tie to an interview. There's so much stuff, that people would think, oh, that's like old school bullshit, whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not. Yeah. that's like tried and true methodology that people have used for a really long time to be successful. I said to someone, want to make a good impression on somebody in an interview? Iron your shirt, put a tie on. Make sure, put shoes on. Don't wear your baggy sweatpants. Don't have, I always tell people, don't have a ring through your nose. Don't, there's a lot of things that, because people remember the good and they remember the bad. And I can still remember the people who showed up. Russell Durrell is one of my first interns. He's been at Boston College, he's probably been at Boston College 20 something years.
Okay.
But I remember him coming for his interview in, a dress shirt, a tie, and a sweater for his interview, and saying yes, sir, and no, sir, and calling me Mr. Boyle. I mean, it took me a long time. I used to always I joke with people. I'm like, Mr. Boyle's in Forest Hill Cemetery. I can take you there if you want to go, but Mr. Boyle's not here. We don't need to be formal about that. Yeah. But it took me forever with him to get him out of that mode. And I was like, man, I really like that. I like that this kid, is polite and is well-mannered and knows enough to dress up. And even dressing up is relative. You might have a kid who comes from nothing, but if he makes the effort to make himself more presentable than what his normal day-to-day might be,
yep,
you'd recognize that. You'd be like, wow, this kid took the time out to make sure that at least he found a shirt with a collar, and he might have had to borrow it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff, I mean, all of, and people always, in some ways, the people probably look at me and think, man, freaking dinosaur, but
no, I don't think so. I got a good story there that is, so one of my guys that I was just talking about, he's one of the most important people in our organization. When he came for his interview, he had not contacted me. He just stopped by the gym. I was sitting on a bike exercising. Somebody let him in, and he comes walking across the weight room, and he's wearing a suit, and he's got a manila envelope with his resume in it. I thought he was coming to sell me insurance. I had no idea he was coming to drop off a resume, right? But what happened in that moment, I kind of just started joking with him a little bit. I was like, man, somebody tell you put on a suit to come to drop a resume off at a gym? And he was like, yeah, he just kind of laughed at it. I was like, man, good for you. But what really stood out to me was his ability to take my ribbing, me just kind of going back and forth with him about it. And I invited him. I kind of looked at his resume. I was like, we'll worry about that later. I was like, why don't you come work out with me tomorrow morning? And he was like, all right. And, and he's been here 5 years, so he definitely made an impression for a different reason. But I think that you're talking to a guy with 40, 50 hours worth of tattoos all over him. But what people don't realize is I didn't do this until I was in a position where I strongly felt my image and my Yankeeness, because I'm in the South, couldn't be held against me very much. I waited a long time to go to tattoos below my arms. I really want one on my neck, and I still haven't gone that hard yet because I'm still aware that there is this level of judgment that comes with those things. I think in our world now, people are so worried about they're going to hold me back. I can't be myself. But I also think we're in a world now where people have no idea who they are. They borrow images and values from other people. And I think you do need to take deep, into consideration, whatever segment of this industry you go into, those things matter. How you show up and represent yourself, it matters. And it may be very contextual. You may walk into a place here where I don't know if a suit matters to me or not, but if it matters at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, you should probably show up that way, right? And if you showed up here that way, I'm not going to hold it against you in any negative, right? So it's probably a best practice either way you look at it.
The truth is, it doesn't really matter to me, but I still like it when I see it.
Shows initiative. It shows
because in all honesty, what my best hires have been? Favors. Some of the best employees that I have were favors. Like Steve Bigelow that I talked about, his dad, God rest his soul, just passed away last year, but his dad was a client. And I'd known him for years. And he said, my son needs an internship. He's a business major at UMass. And I was like, well, Bob's son needs an internship. He'll get an internship for the summer. Did I think he'd be there 10 years later and, doing the things that he's doing and become the coach that he's become? No, did not think that at all. I just thought, favor for the dad. Vinny Toludo, I talked about, runs our pro group. Favor for a hockey coach friend of mine, called me up. He said, my son's friend needs an internship.
Yeah.
Can you get him in? Of course I can, coach. You need him to get in, he's in. And so, again, I'm double dipping because I am again, building my relationship with friends, with clients, because I know that when I go back to them with a recommendation, then I'm going to get what I'm looking for, because when they came to me, I gave them what they were looking for. I always say it's like the scene from The Godfather, there's going to be, I forget the exact words, but basically, so, there's going to come a time when I'm going to come and I'm going to ask you to return the favor. And I believe that too, but some of those favors have paid off so massively for me positively. And I've actually never gone back to some of those people to ask for something in return, but I got something really valuable to me because I was looking to do something good for them.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? It's so there's just so much of this that I always say to people, I'm getting a lot more whatever, earthy, crunchy, karmic as I get older, but I'm a believer. I'm a believer, when people say what goes around comes around, all those things that people say, I believe those things because I've lived that kind of positive karmic life where lots of good things have come back to me, and primarily because I don't think I was looking for things for myself.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, seeds planted 10, 15 years ago, like now are kind of sprouting. And that's why I'll always do anything for anybody in this industry that wants to hear me talk too. It's like, I feel like if I can do somebody a solid, there is some karma to that. And all those sayings are cliche for a reason. It's because there's some level of truth to them. They exist.
Yeah.
And
It's like the secret idea. Some people say that, oh, that's bullshit. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is, but it kind of isn't.
Yeah.
In terms of, it does for whatever reason. I don't know, and I think maybe I do know a handful, but I don't know that many really good, really hardworking people that it hasn't worked out for.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people who were, short timers and whiners and whatever, who it didn't work out for.
Yeah.
And I look at, people, and we always talk, even business wise, I always talk to our guys, but I play the long game, always. I'm always looking, I own a bunch of Berkshire Hathaway stock. There's no better long game guy than Warren Buffett. If you want to be rich, okay, buy Berkshire Hathaway stock and hang with Warren Buffett, and I look at that from an industry standpoint. I believe that in terms of always play the long game. Never go, anytime anybody ever had a short-term gain idea for me, I was like, nope, somebody's going to get screwed.
I don't trust them. I don't trust
short-term
returns. It's never,
it's
I have evidence. It's work.
Yeah, we can make a lot of money fast. I'm always like, who we got to screw?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somebody's going to get screwed in this process if we're going to make a lot of money quick. If someone said to me, hey, I got a really good, 10-year plan for you to improve your business, I'd be like, okay, tell me, what's that? What does that look like? How do we start to implement that, organic, slow growth kind of thing that's going to really enhance what we do versus looking for, the big hit right off the bat. Because and I tell people this last couple of years, because I did the keynotes at Perform Better, maybe 3 years ago now. So I started doing a little more, I guess, self-help kind of talk, which I wasn't really comfortable with. But the other thing I talk about, and is investing.
Yes.
I had a guy that used to train with me, and it's, again, karmic story, right? I never let anybody in the gym who wasn't, if they didn't have a reason to be there, they couldn't come. This guy was an Olympic weightlifter. He walked in, nice guy, said, I'm an Olympic weightlifter. I'm looking for a place with platforms where I can just train a couple nights a week. And for whatever reason, my answer was flat no to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, you can come in. If you come after 6, blah, blah, blah. And we became really good friends. And it turned out he was a really successful financial advisor.
Okay.
But one of the things that he used to talk to me about, he was like, Mike, he said, you won't understand money. He said, until you get to critical mass. And I remember looking at him like, I don't understand. What is your critical mass idea? And he explained it to me with that. He said, he's like, what do you have in your retirement plan? And I was probably at that time. So I have $10,000. And he said, right. So in 7 years, your 10,000 will be 20,000. He said, and that does not seem like a big deal. You're going to look at it and think, okay, I turned 10,000 into 20,000. He said, but when you have $1 million and 7 years later, you turn it into $2 million, he said, you will understand the concept of critical mass. And I'm at the point in my life now where I understand the concept of critical mass, because suddenly, 50, I'm doing pretty good. I've saved a lot of money.
Yeah.
Also 57, I'm like, oh, I got a real lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden 61, I'm like, I got enough money to retire right now. I'm ready. Like I can check out tomorrow.
Yep.
But I didn't really do anything that I hadn't done before. I just was dealing with a larger mass of dollars. And when that money doubled, you know, it's like I would say to somebody, if you think at 3 turns of the wheel in 7 years, 400,000 becomes 800, 800 becomes 1.6 million. You know, and you're like, wait a second, that, 14 years, I went from 400,000 to 1.6 million. And you're like, yep, that's exactly what happened. But, you know, if someone had said, you know, I went from 40,000 to 160,000, you'd be like, oh, that's good. But it's the numbers. I mean, that's why so many guys in big business, you know, it's like, you know, a guy who's making a point on a deal, I'm making a point on this deal, you know, but you realize the deal's $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and all of a sudden he's making a lot of money.
Yeah. People look, I think the way when I came up was like, first I got to make some money. I got to make it. All right. And then when I make it, then I got to save it. And then once I save it, then I'll learn how to grow it. When really you can start all that at the same time. You just have to be really clear on what your fixed needs are, what like Ramit Sethi calls your money dials, like what things do you want to spend money on that you'll dial up and dial down, and then automate as much of everything else as you can. So your decision-making, ego, desire to purchase, to fix the way you feel one day doesn't get in the way of your future. And I say all that from experience, because if I treated my money the way I have over the past 10 years, the first 10 years I was in business, I might be having this conversation with you from an island. You know, I might be just hanging out and, you know, so it's one thing I'm really passionate about is helping coaches figure out how to create like a set it and forget it, automated saving and investing plan, and start that now. Because some guys like me, I was almost a victim of my own success. I made a lot of money my first 2 years in business. I didn't have one of these, like, I had to struggle hard in the beginning things. Like, I just accidentally blew up. And I was lighting money on fire. I mean, as fast as I was getting it, I was spending it. To add to the fact, I'm flying to DC to visit my oldest daughter. I'm fighting custody battles and try to win her. You know, so you add the very real things I needed to spend money on up with my frivolous desire to buy copious amounts of shoes and things of that nature. It wasn't in my best interest. And I think I don't have any regrets. It took that level of stupidity to like hammer home the lessons for me now. And I just want to help, you know, pass that on to young coaches as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's invaluable stuff, because I can remember reading, and I think it was either The Wealthy Barber or The Richest Man in Babylon. I forget which one, because I read them both a long time ago. But one of them talked about your 10% account.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I stuck to that idea of trying to save 10% of what I earned every year. And like my wife,
my daughter, and make her save a dime.
Yeah, my wife and I have lived in more than, I think we've lived in 24 houses. Right? Because we were house flippers. We were, you know, I said we were HGTV people before there was HGTV. Because I read How to Become Financially Successful by Investing in Real Estate. I think it was Robert Allen.
Okay.
But, you know, he talked about the idea of, like, you know, leveraging other people's money, you know, buying real estate, you know, how the fact that real estate increases, you know, that, you know, you can buy a house for $10,000, but you buy an asset that's 100,000 that appreciates at 6%. You know, it's all math, right?
Yes, math.
But we did that. And then you thought, you know, buy the worst house on the best street, fix that house up, sell it to the next person, boom, boom, boom. I mean, you know, probably the majority of the money that I made wasn't from coaching. It's just been from real estate flips, but it was, you know, I learned I can tile, I can drywall, I can frame. You know, I can't do plumbing and electrical. I just literally put my floors in. Like, I'm 60 years old. I put my floors in here last year.
Bad man.
Myself, because I was like, damn, if I'm paying $5,000 for somebody to install my floor, I can do that. You know, I went to
check quick.
yeah. But I like to do it, and I'm good at it. And now I'm at the stage where I enjoy it. There was a time when I didn't mow my own lawn, because I used to look at people and say, hey, you can pay a kid $10 to mow the lawn and you can make 100. You're plus 90. So don't waste any time mowing your lawn.
Yeah.
But now I like to mow my lawn. So
yeah.
I mow my own lawn, you know, and it's a different outlook and a different thought process. But like you said, it's all about, you know, being efficient and saving. And, you know, we give our guys a bonus. If they do 20 personal training appointments, they get a bonus. And I would have to literally prod some people to be like, okay, you're going to get $100 bonus if you do one more session. you're going to make $30 a session. So the 20th session is $130 hour for you. And we'd have people who wouldn't do it. And I'd be like, what is wrong with you?
I don't understand.
Like, I want to do it for you. Like, I want to train a client for you and give you that money. But it takes, like you said, it just takes a while for people to really start to understand money and how money works and how money works for you. It's a difficult concept.
It really is. It really is. We're getting close to an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have time for one or two more questions?
Yes, sir. One or two more, and then we'll call it.
Cool. One of the things that I've really respected about you that is not normal in our industry. There are some guys that I think do it, but I think you've been very brave in this respect. Where does the courage come to stand against what everybody says is the way? The battles I have seen fought on social media over your conversations about back squatting and bilateral squatting as a whole have been amusing, educational, and frustrating as a whole. People don't, I think, seem to get the whole message. Some people can't accept there's truth to it. We absolutely have adopted a lot of those principles here for various different reasons. But there are things I worry about. Now, I'll put one of them out here right now. I've been thinking about writing an article called Death to the Max Effort Method. And I'm talking about it within the context of private market training facilities, working with high school athletes who we know are also lifting in max effort parameters at school. And for a long time, a lot of guys, no matter what they did at school, they're coming to the gym to do max effort training. That's just what they did. And it made no sense to me. But I, quite frankly, don't want to spend a lot of time debating with people unless we could do it in a venue like this. I don't want to get trapped on a social media debate with people. And I can only imagine the amount of hours that you have spent dealing with people, and it's probably been very frustrating. But I just want to know, where does that courage to stand up like that come from? Because you could have kept that quiet and not dealt with it all and just made changes inside your program. But you put a target on your back and said, this is what we stand for, and this is why I stand for it.
Yeah, well, one, I really believe, I look at myself as an educator. You know, my father was an educator. I grew up in a family of educators. And I think I've had there was a time when I said, I want to have an impact on the field.
Yeah.
I want to be able to look at, you talked about a legacy. I want to be able to look back at this and think I had an impact. And in order to do that, you have to have some principles, I think. You can't, if you just decide, I want my impact to be like, I want to be really well liked. Like, no, I don't really care if I'm well liked. I would like to be well liked because I did the right things and I treated people correctly, but I wouldn't like to be well liked because I compromised myself or compromised what I believed in. And so what I wanted more was to be respected, because I can go back to the people who were challenging the status quo when I was young, the Don Chews and the Vern Gambettas and the Alvar Meals and those people. And I remember looking at those guys and thinking, man, I would love to be one of those guys. I'd love to be that guy that gets up in front of, at that time it was an NSCA convention, and the room is full and people are kind of hanging on my every word. I have to admit that the ego part of me wanted that to happen. Yeah. And I realized that won't happen if you're not willing to take a stand on what you really believe is true. And for me, part of it is just flat out stubborn. I think I'm right. I tell people, I think I'm right up until the moment I realize I'm wrong. You know what I mean? Like I don't equivocate at all. I don't have any of that. Like, I hate all the "it depends" shit. I'm like, no, it does not depend. Excuse my language. It does not at all. Like it is black or white, right or wrong. Yes, there are bad exercises. Yes, I think this is better than this. I'm not trying to make a bunch of people I don't know happy. And I realize that I may make a bunch of people that I don't know unhappy.
Yeah.
But none of that bothered me, because I used to jokingly say, hey, I'll go back home to Reading, Massachusetts, and my wife will still like me, and my kids will still like me, and my dogs will still like me. And the fact that some guy in whatever Tennessee doesn't like me is not affecting my day at all.
Yep.
But at the same time, I've realized that, like you said, the time that you spend on social media is so powerful. And I think that's part, I was an early adopter. I realized I saw the powerful tools that were available to us, and I utilized those tools, whether it was books or DVDs or video or social media. I was not the first person to do any of those things, but I jumped into those things with both feet. and said, hey, I want to be an educator, and I'm going to get myself in front of a lot of people and attempt to educate. In some cases, I mean, I joke about it all the time, but I mean, to some people, I was a clown. I was a laughing stock in 2009 when I said, we're not going to squat anymore. But that was not like, I didn't just wake up someday and think, man, I'm going to stir some internet shit up today, and up with this no squat idea. This was years and years in the making of training real athletes and, having people with the achy backs, like all the shit we went through that got us to that point. But when we got to that point, I was kind of like, hey, guess what? I'm at that point, and I'd like to make that announcement, so that everybody knows that I'm at that point and probably not going back.
Yeah. That's all.
It's like I said, stubborn, maybe, desire to educate, definitely, and also not a good solid dose of not caring what anybody else thinks. Like I was never, I don't want to win a popularity contest.
Yeah. Man, I wish that came a little bit easier for me. And there's something in me that I think doesn't want to be hated. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's a desire to be liked, and maybe that's the opposite, but there's something in me there that I'm continuously working on to not care about the opinions of others. That I'm a very critical thinker. It takes me a long time before I put words out on what I believe. And I need to just continue to be stronger in that, as opposed to worrying about the people who won't receive the message, because polarity attracts and repels. And there are a lot of people that have become stronger Mike Boyle followers because of that position. And you probably repelled some people that weren't going to spend money with you or come visit or benefit from your services. So I think there's a lesson in that too, even if somebody else watching this is a little bit like me, where they kind of struggle with that.
I'll give you my last lesson before my last thought. I always say to people, it's like, I wanted to be Mercedes-Benz, and I didn't really care, if the Ford Escort driver was not a fan of mine. It didn't matter to me. Because, it's like you look at Mercedes, they're never looking and thinking, how many Escorts did Ford sell that year, before they got rid of it? That's not even on their radar. And that's the way I always looked at it, was that, like you said there, if somebody's like a hardcore West Side guy, then they think I'm a loser and they make fun of me, and that's okay. But if somebody's a bright, intelligent, young, up-and-coming strength coach with some curiosity, they might start going, stuff Mike Boyle's saying actually makes some sense. If you can get out of your own way and get out of your preconceptions about what you think training really is. And so I think it's almost like you said, polarity. I'm only seeking to draw a certain percentage of people to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to drive the other percentage away. I just know that, you won't get anywhere by being all things to all people. That doesn't really work.
That's right.
And, whether that's in business or whether that's in sort of the, the intellectual property world, you just got to kind of think, okay, stick your flag in the ground. This is what I think. And then live with the ramifications of your thoughts. I love to laugh at people in talks, because now I have I call them the charter members of, I used to think Mike Boyle was a pussy club, because there's a lot of guys now, like early 40s strength coaches, who've admitted on podcasts and on social media that they thought I was a clown and a fool.
Hilarious.
And then they got a little older and a little wiser. I had a conversation with my friend, I don't know if you know Robbie Bork, but Robbie's in Ireland and he's a super smart guy. But I've forgot I said this, but I drove him. He came to perform Better Summer Now with me. He drove down with me to New York. So we spent 6 hours in the car or whatever. No, probably more, probably like 8 hours in the car going back and forth. And he said, Mike, at one point you said, eventually everybody will think like me. He said, now I remember thinking, that's a pretty cocky statement to make, that you think everybody's going to think like you. And I looked at him, I said, but I believe it. I said, I think everybody at some point in their career will realize, wow, what I did was not that smart. Because I always say, the only thing I have on everybody else is time. And I was the max effort dumbass, in my late teens and early 20s. And I got the bad shoulders and the bad back and the bad neck and all that stuff to go for, to go with it, from all the stupid shit that I did. And then later on, I did that to other people. And then I got a little smarter, and then I started realizing I stopped doing it to myself, and then I eventually stopped doing it to other people. And all that paid off. So here we sit.
That's right. That's great stuff, Coach. I don't want to hold you any longer. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Means a lot to me. I think the people watching are going to get a lot of value out of this.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, I loved your podcast, and I really enjoyed it enough. And I was like, man, I got to reach out to Andy again, because that's to me, I'm like, oh, that's a thing. It's a gap. Because even when you were at the National High School thing, I didn't even know you were there. By the time I found out you were there, I was like saying goodbye to people and on my way out the door. And that was one of my big regrets. I was like, man, I would have loved to just sat with Andy for like a half hour and caught up on give me the family rundown here, like what's going on. And so, being able to catch up and be part of this with you is nice for me. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And hope to see you in person at some point in time when the world opens up a little bit, but we'll make that happen. Drink a beer, have a good conversation.
Excellent. Perfect.
All right, Coach. Thank you very much. Hope everybody.
You are welcome, my friend. That was a pleasure. I could do that